Welcome, everybody. Today we're going to be doing a variety of things. We're going to be shooting together. We're going to be doing two scenes from Schindler's List, some basic camera moves as well, and we're also going to talk about cinema language, excuse me, how, when, and why you move the camera, and overall give you a better understanding of what's going on the screen that you're watching, so that you can do that yourself. You can pull off the same moves, and more importantly, know when to try to pull off a move versus letting the camera still. The best thing to do is just to get started with the slideshow. Welcome to Directing Motion. I'm about to ruin film and television for many of you. Literally. And this has been confirmed already by several hundred people who have tweeted out or emailed me saying, you know what? You put this slide up in the beginning. I didn't really buy it. And I was previously slightly annoying to my mate, and now they can't stand me. I was going, oh, notice how terrible that move is, or how unmotivated that pan is. So things will change, but I'd like you to go from being passive consumers of film and video to being active dissectors of it, and students, if you will, of the medium, so that when you comes to you shooting and directing as a filmmaker, as a DP, as whatever, your one-man band, one-person band, you'll know what you have at your disposal. First, I'm going to quickly show you three pieces. The same exact scene shot over time. This one's from Citizen Kane, Orson Welles, in 1941, of course, Greg Toland. Watch this scene real quick. Notice how stale it is. Notice how there's absolutely no movement within the camera other than the characters themselves moving. And of course, cameras back then were bigger, they were harder to move, although Orson Welles definitely pushed those boundaries in this movie, in fact. But watch 36 years later when we go to Close Encounters of the Third Kind. You'll notice the camera does not move, but notice how rich the frame is. Notice the movement within the blinds. Notice the movement of the trees projected onto the side of the house.
Barry!
The key here is that as film progresses, people require a richer and richer frame. They require more stimulus, either within the frame itself, as is the case here. You see how rich this frame is with the stars and all the layers, the colors, or in even more modern filmmaking of today, I would venture to say that it's hard to be a competitive director if you don't master movement and energizing the frame. People just don't have the same attention spans that they did 70 years ago. Here's, again, Spielberg, Empire of the Sun, 1987, 11 years later, and watch how the camera is constantly in movement, done with Alan Davio. We're going from an over-the-shoulder to a point-of-view shot, all within the same sequence. You feel how it's a bit more immersive, a bit more dynamic. So that's just three quick examples. I'm going to show you one scene. This will be the last thing I ever show you twice. But as you watch it, I really want you to pay attention to how motion is being used. We'll watch it a second time, and I'll help you dissect it.
I'll get you.
Let us stay, please, let us stay. I'll do anything for you. Let us stay.
Get the hell out of my house!
Let us stay. Let us stay. No.
You ain't never coming back here! Get out here! Get off my land! Get off my land! Get off my land! You ain't never coming over!
All right. So, by an honest show of hands, raise your hand if you got sucked into that scene. Okay. That has to stop. That's the key. That cannot happen anymore if you want to learn about film. Measure a director by how many times she or he can get me sucked in when I watch a second time. I'll generally go watch a film and just enjoy it and get taken on the ride, which is the entire purpose of film. It's an immersive medium. It's meant to be consumed passively. You're supposed to get lost within whatever length of motion that you're watching, whether it's a 20-minute short or a feature-length film or a 30-minute, 45, 50-minute episodic. Make sense? So that's what they're trying to do. That's what we're all trying to do to our audiences. But when I go back and I buy the Blu-ray or download whatever it is on iTunes or Netflix, I use the rewind button and I look at particularly powerful sequences. And if I get sucked in once, I curse the director. If I get sucked in twice, I really curse the director. And if it happens 3 times, then you know they're doing a pretty masterful job. That should be your measure. But you should do everything you can to not get sucked in. You should actually start breaking it down. Let's look at this scene again with the volume turned way down. And notice how the camera starts off locked off. Just as they're frozen together, resisting being torn apart, the camera is also frozen. Now it starts to move from left to right. We have the last moment of resistance as we cut into a tighter shot of the 2 sisters. It's violent, but notice how the camera is taking on a personality of its own now. It is going from left to right, almost as if though it were a magnet pulling the action forward. It's taking on a personality of sorts. Notice the depth within the frame. All the kids are placed around there, so you can feel the camera's movement in the same way that you can feel the structure there on the left as we continue the left to right slide. We're, of course, going to cut to a tighter version here to show the violence of it all, of him slamming his fist down on her own hands and ripping the sisters apart for the last time. Notice the kids again, cued right there to wipe the frame, again, left to right as the camera continues. We're going to cut to a point of view, her view of the scene, a reverse, and then this little girl motivates the camera left to right again. Notice all the foreground activity, the set design, to make you appreciate this movement as we continue left to right. Right here, it stops momentarily, but now we're using height, high-low. Every time he's looking at her, we're above him, looking down on her, position of power. Every time she looks at him, we're looking up. Look at how threatening he looks from below with his fist. So the placement of the camera at this point, as it's still, because it's resisting as they are. It's not accepting their fate. She's holding on, and finally she starts to slowly move here as she does. A last act of defiance. Notice how we're tight in on her eyes. You can connect with her, with him. All this is within the design or the coverage principles of this scene. She finally accepts it. One last act of defiance as they make the last connection for about 30 years or so. The camera slowly starts to accept their fate and slide away again. But notice how the camera is this layer that's always been there that you may not have been paying attention to. It's always going to be subtle. Camera movement is a subtle additional layer to cinema. It is not everything, but it can be extremely powerful. As finally we'll see, we're going to jib down or boom down here violently, and you can see how the cornrows effectively split the 2 environments together as that happens. And one last act of defiance. This is the only time we push in onto the young Whoopi character, and you can see her emotion. So the point is, this layer is always going on. We just may not be paying attention to it as much as we should. Because when it comes to be our turn on our shoot, on a set, we have to employ these exact same tools to make for a more effective filmmaker. The most important point that I want you to get about the examples I'm about to show you now is that these are subtle things. But when you add great acting with great composition and lighting, and music and sound design with great movement, as well as coverage and sequencing principles, that's how you get very powerful cinema. One of the main things that you may be finding is that your sequences are not up to par to what you wish, and that people aren't connecting with what you're shooting. A big part of that may just be that the movement isn't there. The coverage principles are not being used that we're going to look at today. Here's another example here, this time from Band of Brothers. We start off on an extreme close-up of violin strings. And all of us at this point probably expect to cut away, given how difficult this is to shoot on a technical level. Still quiet. You'll notice some smoke brush past the camera from right to left. In a second, there you go. That's a little layer of movement. As that happens, we pull away. We reveal his face and a background. And we notice the smoke and the women walking by from right to left, which motivates our camera to go right as we see the foreground, middle ground, and now background. These soldiers go from right to left. Notice the gentleman with the bricks in the background, that woman grieving with a portrait of someone. That same gentleman comes into frame from right to left and continues to motivate the camera. Cue the horse. Hopefully you notice the design of this shot and how complex it is and the amount of elements that continue the camera on this one-shot wonder. As we tilt up, we find these gentlemen surrounded by two other characters, handing back something they can hopefully salvage, a table, and now we reverse our movement from left to right, and the shot continues. There's not a single dead spot within this one shot. That's the key. It's been orchestrated right down to the detail of not only having a gentleman, of course, in the foreground going from left to right, but all the movement behind them. The same horse is doing a full loop now. You'll notice the soldiers coming back out of the background there with the smoke and the fire. Everything is very carefully coordinated to keep this shot alive as long as possible. This is all in the design of the one shot. Many of these techniques we'll be discussing tonight during the evening session when we look at one shots in particular. And we'll some behind-the-scenes footage of Larry McConkey, one of the best Steadicam operators in history, and hear him talk about it, see behind-the-scenes footage of what he shot, and of course here we end on a one shot of one of our main characters. So all this has been one long take. You're in effect going through their eyes and scanning the entire scene and coming back to your one main character, all within one move. So that's the art of movement that we'll be talking about. The first term is the easiest term, locked off. It simply means the camera doesn't move. Here's a great example of it from Fargo. This is Roger Deakins and the Coen brothers, of course. This was actually partially Roger's idea in that they were supposed to fill the entire lot with cars. He showed up early in the morning and said, don't bring the cars in. It's much more effective like this. Notice how this frame makes you feel. How would you say this makes you feel right off the bat? Lonely. Desolate. He's literally at a crossroads. You notice the literal crossroads at the bottom, just below the car, the two paths crossing. He's just ordered the kidnapping of his wife that he can't stop now. It's too late. She's in fact already been kidnapped. And he's just been turned down for a loan that will allow him to save his business nefariously. So he's really in a bad spot. But this is a great example of where you do not want to move the camera. You want to keep it stationary, because this is all about being still, about being frozen in time, and about being in a very bad spot. So if you start doing these big, crazy moves at this point, it doesn't really help serve the idea or the mood of what you're trying to communicate. Does that make sense? Panning is one of the most basic emotions. What do we spend as human beings most of our time doing? Looking left, looking right. It's the most comfortable way to turn our head, which is why cinema is also a horizontal medium versus tilting up or tilting down. How does it feel when you look up at someone? Awkward. You look down on someone. Better. It's a position of power. Panning, keep in mind that there is an association with the direction of the pan. If you study cinema language and you study screen direction, you'll notice that when we pan from left to right, it feels a lot more comfortable than when we pan from right to left. Why? It's the direction in which we read. It's simple. I never really bought onto it until I met the script supervisor who said, you know what, I never studied that, but as a script supervisor, I noticed that every time the camera go from right to left, it didn't feel quite as comfortable. So it's a subtle thing. But in one of my shorts, Mobius, every time things were going bad, we panned right to left. Every time things were going good, we went from left to right. It was actually what we call a device that we used throughout the entire short. It's subtle, super subtle, but it is there, so keep that in mind, okay? Here's a great example of a pan from right to left that's meant to disorient you a little bit more than left to right. Also notice how Dean Semler and Kevin Costner, the director, chose a relatively tight lens. The backstory here is Kevin Costner is in the middle of Montana or somewhere, and he's in an outpost all by himself, and he gets woken up in the middle of the night. So watch how the camera movement complements that.
Yes, sir, I have. No, I'll ask. 7.
And just as he's been knocked out now and is semi-conscious, we, the audience, experience this through our ears. And that motivates the camera to go back from left to right. You see that nice little slit? Really nice shot. But subtle things like shooting a little bit tighter, if you shot wide, you can see the entirety of the cabin and you'd be able to pick up the door. If you stay tight, you bring the audience on a certain journey, and as he knocks his head, you're just as surprised as he is. And then we stay on that shot, which is pretty rich, and we hear what caused him to wake up, and it's Native Americans stealing his horse. Sis, actually, a number of horses. And it's a great little scene. Here's an example of the slide. So panning is obviously on axis, versus a slide is when you sidestep. Okay, slide is always relative as well as the pan to the orientation of the camera. Meaning that if I go to this camera and I say pan left, everyone knows what I'm talking about. Because the camera can only pan relative to its orientation. Go ahead and unlock this. So you'll pan left or you'll pan right in the same way that relative to the camera, you slide right or slide left. The idea is if you talk to an actor or anyone in your crew, you always say camera left or camera right. Meaning look at the camera, and no matter where you are in the room, you should know what that means relative to the camera. Simple, precise communication. Okay? For actors, sometimes I might confuse them, but most professional actors will understand camera left, camera right. Okay? You can always flip it your left, your right, which is, of course, the opposite for you. Simple stuff. It saves a lot of time on set. Let's look at this slide here from Empire of the Sun. And he is in no man's land. He is sliding from left to right, and the camera is following him. Keep in mind, it's a great use of a slide because we don't want him to stand up. If he stands up, he's going to get captured or shot for trying to escape. He's just trying to capture a rabbit. But it's interesting to see how they use that within the move itself, Alan Davio and Spielberg. Notice how much you feel the depth of the scene with the barbed wire in the foreground on a wide-angle lens. That is part and parcel as to why you would slide in an environment versus panning. You'll see a pan coming up. It feels much more two-dimensional, right? So that's one of the reasons you go for the trouble of panning and sliding, versus panning. Let's look at a tilt. Very simple. Tilt your head up, tilt your head down. As I mentioned, a lot of this camera movement is really based on how we move. We walk towards someone. How does it feel, sir, as I walk towards you? And I continue walking. It's uncomfortable. I'm impeding on your space. And I'm getting taller and looking down on you. You're looking up at me. It's not a comfortable feeling. Guess what? Same thing happens with the camera usually on another character. Sometimes there's other uses for it. In the same way, if I pull back, it's generally out of fear or to get my bearings. I want to see the environment a little bit better. A lot of this stuff is very logical and very intuitive. So as you move a camera, try to think about what would I do in that environment? How can I personify that character's movement or the camera's movement? This is a very simple tilt up from Brazil, one of my favorite films, Terry Gilliam. If you haven't seen it, I highly recommend it. Notice that we're looking straight down. You can notice how long his shadow is. That personifies his character because he's just been given a new job, a new position with more power. And you can see how daunting that environment looks up with a simple tilt up, okay? So two reasons why Gilliam chose that angle. A lot of people say jib up and jib down. I do it all the time, you'll notice. A more precise would be boom up and boom down. It's when you physically raise the camera or lower it along the y-axis. Geek talk, if you look at 3D axis, y is up and down, x is left to right, and a z is forward or backward. So you may hear things like a z-axis move. That means the camera's moving into space or out of space. And you may hear a lot of time-lapse people saying that x-axis moves are boring, sliding left to right, versus z-axis are much more interesting as you push into an environment or pull back, which I would tend to agree to. So booming up or down. Here is an interesting use of a jib up or a boom up from Citizen Kane. The backstory of this is that Citizen Kane's girlfriend is a singer. He loves her. No one wants her on Broadway. Can't get her to get hired. So as you do as a billionaire, he buys her own opera. This is the premiere. Ask yourself, why did Orson Welles decide to perform this move here? You'll notice all the activity, notice all the foreground action, brushing the camera, all the silhouettes going from left to right and right to left to make for a richer frame. We'll talk about that as we go throughout the day on how that is critical to big productions. And here we go. So of course we're going to boom up. And guess what? Of course, it's motivated by the curtains initially, but now it's going to continue and leave her out of frame. Why? What are you guys associating with that, if anything? What happens when the camera booms up? Generally, it's someone that's dead on a battlefield and going up to the heavens, right? It's a very common use. Another common use is you'll see someone somewhere, will boom up to the sky, and find them at the top of the building as the leader 20 years later. It's a great way to pass through time. There are associations with booming up. In this case, it's pretty clear. She stinks. Okay, so he's trying to tell you or play with you initially, saying she's taking off. Literally, her career, her star is rising. She made it. Orson Welles got his way. He bought her her own opera, and she's going to take off despite all the critics and leave them behind and below. All the intelligentsia that surrounds her, who cares what they think? And then he gets to the top, and you realize that the grips themselves say she stinks, which is the ultimate insult. Zooming in, simple. You guys all know what this is. It's using a lens to zoom in or zoom out. Of course, what's the main advantage of zooming in on someone versus pushing in? Physically moving the camera. It is? It's focus change, right? So as I push my camera in, I've got to have a second person or myself, I'm really good at it, constantly changing focus at the exact same rate, which, as you know, depending on the length of your lens, is not the easiest thing. In fact, it can be pretty hard on a wide-angle lens because it's a very small change. So that's why, until about 5 years ago, almost all episodic television was shot, on a stage, or maybe 10 years ago at this point, with 3 cameras, on moving bases, and they would zoom in and out of the characters. Think of Seinfeld. It's just the way it was done. It was easy. It was quick. One operator could do it all. Now, of course, today, when you see a series like True Detective, there's really no distinction between television and film. But that used to be the single biggest distinction between television and film, was that TV always zoomed and movies always moved through space.